Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every ache in your body, every breathless moment, every wave of confusion and pain you've ever felt, all of it, stems from one terrifying truth. A truth that was never your choice. Your trembling hands, the way your chest tightens, the fog that clouds your thinking, none of it began with you. It began with choices made generations ago by people who thought they were preserving greatness, and now you live with the consequences. You discover that your mother is also your cousin. Your father? He's your uncle. Your grandmother is your great-aunt. The family tree doesn't branch. It loops back into itself like a snake devouring its own tail. You weren't born out of love. You were engineered, the result of a breeding program meant to keep bloodlines clean, power intact, and wealth untouched. Human cost? Ignored. And here's the most chilling part. This isn't some gothic horror story. This was real life for countless women in history, trapped in bodies broken by inbreeding, doomed by dynasties that worshipped lineage over life. Before we dive into these untold stories of pain and survival, if you're fascinated by the hidden truths of history, the stories that textbooks won't tell, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I think it's amazing that we're all connecting over these forgotten echoes of the past, no matter where we are in the world. To truly understand what these women endured, we have to understand the cold logic behind their suffering. For centuries, European royals believed that their blood was sacred, literally. Blue blood, they called it, purer than that of commoners, touched by divine right. To keep that blood untainted, they married each other. Cousins with cousins, uncles with nieces, siblings even. It became normal, expected. By the 1500s, royal families across Europe were one tangled web of shared ancestry, a single sprawling dynasty marrying into itself over and over again. What they didn't know, what they couldn't yet comprehend, was that they were creating a genetic time bomb, and it would explode in the bodies and minds of their descendants. No family embodied this nightmare more completely than the Habsburgs, rulers of Austria and Spain. Their motto could have been, "Let others fight wars. You, happy Austria, marry." And marry they did. But their happiness was a myth. What they left behind was a trail of pain. Let's begin in Vienna, in the year 1634. The air in the Hofburg Palace is heavy with incense and silence. A child is born, a little girl named Maria Anna of Austria. From her first breath, she carries the curse. She is the daughter of deeply entangled bloodlines. Generations of cousin marriages have shaped her DNA like a maze with no exit. Her body is the battlefield where these decisions play out. As a child, Maria Anna knows something's wrong. While other children laugh and run through the marble halls, she struggles just to stand upright. Her spine is twisted, bending her into a painful hunch. Breathing is hard. Her jaw juts forward unnaturally, making it nearly impossible to chew. Her food must be cut into tiny pieces. Even then, every meal is a slow, exhausting ordeal. But physical pain is only the beginning. As she grows older, Maria Anna begins to understand. The truth comes not through words, but through paintings. The endless portraits of her ancestors staring down at her from every wall. Each face carries the same features she sees in the mirror. The same jaw, the same eyes, the same spine. She begins to grasp the cruel inheritance passed down to her. She isn't suffering from a mystery illness. She is just the next in line, a victim of a dynasty's obsession with bloodline. The palace physicians, with their bloodletting rituals and whispered prayers, are powerless. They never tell her the truth directly. To her face, they blame divine will and unknown ailments. But behind closed doors, they speak of the Habsburg curse. Maria Anna retreats into a life of shadows. Her rooms stay dim, the heavy curtains drawn. The world outside is something she watches from behind glass. But her mind, her brilliant, unbroken mind, becomes her refuge. She devours books, history, poetry, philosophy. In the pages of distant lands, she finds something she has never known in real life: freedom. In these imagined worlds, people marry for love, children grow strong, no one suffers because of someone else's ambition. But even within the palace, her body is treated not with compassion, but curiosity. Physicians study her like a specimen. They take measurements, record the angle of her spine, note the severity of her jaw. She becomes a subject, not a daughter, not a niece, not a princess, a study, a case. And then comes the worst part: loneliness. Suitors, all cousins, are quietly horrified when they see her. Marriage negotiations end before they begin. Even in a world where cousin marriage is the norm, Maria Anna's condition is too severe. She is left unmarried, not because she chose solitude, but because no one chose her. At 32, her body finally gives out. She dies young, surrounded not by loved ones, but by stone walls and empty hallways. Her cause of death? Officially, it was various ailments, but the truth is unspoken. She died of inbreeding, of decisions made long before she was born. From Austria, we move to Spain. There we meet perhaps the most tragic figure in this entire grim tapestry. Joanna of Castile, later known as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad, was born in 1479. Her parents were none other than Ferdinand and Isabella, the same monarchs who funded Columbus and expelled Jews and Muslims from Spain. Joanna seemed destined for greatness. She was brilliant, multilingual, educated far beyond what was expected of a royal woman at the time. But beneath that brilliance, a storm was already brewing. Her parents were cousins, part of the same tangled net of royal European bloodlines. And within that blood, the seeds of suffering had already been sown. The first cracks in Joanna's mental health appeared after her marriage to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy, a union crafted not for love, but for politics. Philip was cold, unfaithful, dismissive. And Joanna? She loved him with a desperation that frightened those around her. It was intense, obsessive, unrelenting. But was it madness? Or was it the logical reaction of a woman raised to believe that marriage was everything, only to find herself abandoned and humiliated by the one man who was supposed to protect her? The real descent began when Philip died suddenly in 1506. Joanna didn't just mourn. She unraveled. She refused to bury him. She traveled across Spain with his coffin, opening it repeatedly to kiss his decaying face. The image is horrific, but it tells us something deeper. Joanna had been so starved of love, so cut off from the world, that even a corpse was better than being alone. Her father Ferdinand, and later her son Charles V, used her grief to justify imprisoning her. For 46 years. She was locked away in the convent of Santa Clara in Tordesillas, a royal prisoner stripped of all power. Her rooms were cold and dark. She was rarely bathed, fed sparingly. Her attendants reported that she would scream for hours, tear her clothes, refuse to speak, or sob without stopping. But here's the question history keeps asking. Was she truly mad? Or was she driven mad by betrayal, by isolation, by generations of genetic damage? Modern historians are starting to see Joanna not as a madwoman, but as a victim of her time and her bloodline. Her behavior, while extreme, aligns with what we now recognize as symptoms of depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And the genetics? They matter. Joanna came from a family where mental illness ran deep. Her great-grandmother had episodes of delusion. Her daughter, Catherine, would later suffer severe depression. The pattern was right there, if anyone had been willing to look. But instead of compassion, Joanna was treated like a threat, an embarrassment, a problem to be locked away. She died in 1555, still imprisoned, still labeled La Loca. Her death was barely acknowledged, her memory erased from the throne she was born to inherit. From Spain, our story turns to another royal girl, one immortalized in art, yet erased in agency. Margaret Teresa of Spain was born in 1651, the daughter of Philip IV and his niece Mariana of Austria. Yes, his niece. By this point, Habsburg inbreeding was so normal that marrying your brother's daughter was seen as a political strategy, not a scandal. Margaret Teresa's face is familiar to many, even if her story is not. She was the subject of Diego Velázquez's iconic paintings, Las Meninas among them. In those portraits, she appears doll-like, dressed in layers of elaborate silk, surrounded by servants and court drama. But if you look closely, really look, you'll see the truth. The slightly protruding jaw, the far-off gaze, the rigid posture that hints at spinal issues. Even in childhood, the signs of Habsburg inbreeding were there. From the moment she could speak, Margaret Teresa was told what her life would be. She would marry her uncle, Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor. She was just a toddler when the engagement was arranged. Europe celebrated it as a diplomatic victory. No one asked what it would mean for Margaret. She grew up under immense pressure. Every language she learned, every song she played, every carefully practiced dance, all of it was to make her a more appealing bride to her uncle, a polished asset in the Habsburg marriage market. At age 15, she was married off. Leopold was 26, old enough to be her father, also her actual uncle. The wedding was extravagant, the celebrations lavish. But for Margaret, it marked the beginning of the end. She was expected to produce heirs immediately, despite her fragile health and young age. She became pregnant multiple times. The results were heartbreaking. Her first child died in infancy. Her second pregnancy ended in miscarriage. When she finally gave birth to a son who survived, the court rejoiced, until it became clear the child bore the same genetic deformities as the rest of the bloodline. Each pregnancy made Margaret weaker. Her body was already compromised by inbreeding. Now it was pushed to the brink. She suffered from constant fatigue, seizures, digestive issues. Her speech began to fail. Doctors recorded her symptoms meticulously, but no one dared name the cause. The truth was too dangerous. Margaret Teresa died at just 21 years old. The official record says she died of a fever. But the reality? Her body had simply collapsed under the weight of generations of inbreeding and relentless childbearing. The empire mourned her, but not for her suffering. They mourned the loss of a vessel for more royal children. Now we travel to Versailles, the glittering symbol of French grandeur. Beneath its gold leaf ceilings and silk-draped chambers lived another Habsburg woman carrying the burden of her bloodline. Anna of Austria, born in 1601, was the daughter of Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria, another uncle-niece marriage. another child born with the weight of legacy pressing on her shoulders. Anna's childhood was marked by quiet struggles. She learned slowly. Her jaw protruded, a subtle but unmistakable sign of Habsburg lineage. Eating was painful, speaking awkward, but worst of all were the emotional shadows that clung to her. Today we'd call it anxiety, possibly depression. Back then it was seen as weakness, something to be corrected through discipline or ignored entirely. At age 14, Anna was married off to Louis XIII of France. It was a political move, meant to seal peace between France and Spain. But no one considered what it would do to Anna. She was taken from everything she knew and placed in the cold, foreign world of the French court. Louis was distant, emotionally detached. Historians now believe he suffered from depression and may have been homosexual, though such things could never be spoken of at the time. Their marriage was a quiet disaster. Anna was expected to produce heirs, but each pregnancy ended in tragedy. Miscarriages, stillbirths, infants who didn't survive. Court physicians blamed Anna. They subjected her to humiliating treatments, bloodletting, bizarre diets, invasive exams. They told her she was defective, that she had failed. No one looked at her genes. No one dared say that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't her fault. The pressure mounted. The whispers grew. Nobles began suggesting that France needed a new queen. Anna began avoiding public appearances. Her anxiety deepened. She spent entire days hidden in her rooms. Some reported she developed agoraphobia, terrified of stepping into the spotlight. And then, miraculously, after 23 years of marriage, she gave birth to a son. The future Louis XIV, the Sun King. France rejoiced. Anna, however, was caught between triumph and terror. She had done her duty, but would she be expected to do it again? She gave birth to a second son, Philippe, 2 years later. The succession was secured, but the emotional and physical toll never left her. Anna spent her later years in quiet agony. Stomach issues, breathing problems, periods of deep melancholy. Doctors called them attacks of sadness. Today, we'd call them panic attacks and clinical depression. She died in 1666, having lived long enough to see her son become one of the most powerful monarchs in Europe. But her true legacy isn't found in Louis XIV's court. It's found in the human cost she paid, the price of being born a Habsburg woman. And now we turn to the most famous name of all, Marie Antoinette. She's remembered as the queen who lost her head during the French Revolution. But her story too begins with a bloodline shaped by centuries of inbreeding. Marie Antoinette was born in 1755, the daughter of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria and Francis I, Holy Roman Emperor. While their marriage wasn't as closely related as some, it still carried the baggage of generations of genetic compression. Her portraits, painted in pastel oils and court finery, show a beautiful young woman. But if you look closely, you'll see it. The subtle Habsburg jaw, the downturned eyes, the pale, almost translucent skin, echoes of the past. But Marie's real battles were hidden. She suffered from severe menstrual problems, hormonal imbalances, frequent miscarriages, all signs of reproductive issues that could be traced back through her ancestry. Her marriage to Louis XVI of France was fraught from the beginning. They were both young, both awkward, and both carrying genetic burdens neither fully understood. The marriage wasn't consummated for years. Rumors spread. Court whispers blamed Marie, then Louis, then both. Physicians examined her regularly, looking for signs of feminine failure. No one thought to ask whether centuries of cousin marriage might have something to do with it. When Marie did finally become pregnant, the trials didn't stop. Her pregnancies were filled with anxiety, nausea, and what modern doctors would recognize as prenatal depression. Her first daughter, Marie-Thérèse, survived. But her other children? Most did not. Each death chipped away at her sanity. And as the revolution gathered storm outside Versailles, Marie Antoinette found herself unequipped to navigate it. Her mental health, fragile from years of trauma and genetic predisposition, began to fracture. As France descended into chaos, Marie Antoinette became the perfect scapegoat, the foreign queen, the symbol of extravagance. But what most people didn't see was the woman beneath the diamonds. Unraveling under pressure, she was never meant to bear. Witnesses described her erratic behavior. Long stretches of silence broken by emotional outbursts, sudden withdrawals from court, hours spent in private prayer followed by manic public appearances. Today, we'd recognize these as signs of bipolar disorder or severe anxiety, conditions known to run in genetically compromised families like the Habsburgs. Her enemies turned these symptoms into weapons. The infamous phrase, "let them eat cake," which she likely never said, was used to paint her as indifferent, even cruel. But those close to her saw something else. A woman overwhelmed, confused, terrified, and utterly alone. During her imprisonment after the monarchy fell, Marie Antoinette began to show signs of psychological collapse. Guards noted her vacant stares, her inability to follow questions during interrogation, her strange detachment. She wasn't just a fallen queen. She was a traumatized mother who had watched her children torn away and her husband executed. In October 1793, she was led to the guillotine. Witnesses said she carried herself with dignity. But the truth is, she died never truly understanding why her life had been so painful. She had inherited more than a crown. She had inherited centuries of suffering. To truly grasp the depth of the Habsburg tragedy, we need to zoom out beyond individuals to entire generations of women born broken by design. In late 17th and early 18th century Spain, a cluster of royal daughters, known as the Spanish Infantas, emerged as perhaps the most chilling embodiment of genetic collapse. These were the sisters, nieces, and cousins of King Charles II of Spain, himself the final doomed result of 16 generations of inbreeding. Charles II was so genetically compromised that modern researchers estimate his inbreeding coefficient was higher than that of a child born to brother and sister. He was infertile, epileptic, and possibly intellectually disabled. But it's his female relatives, the Infantas, who bore the cruelest burden. Let's begin with Maria Margarita, born in 1651. She didn't speak clearly until she was 7. She struggled to walk. Her attendants described her behavior as erratic, withdrawn. Today, we'd call it a neurodevelopmental disorder. Back then, it was called divine punishment. Still, she was considered marriageable. Why? Because of her blood. Her sister, Maria Teresa, suffered from what doctors called falling sickness, epilepsy. She also had such severe respiratory issues she couldn't climb stairs. Her spine was so curved she needed cushions to sit upright. Her jaw made chewing nearly impossible. And yet, she too was pushed toward marriage, because blood came before biology. These young women were raised in the Alcazar of Madrid, a palace that had become more medical ward than royal home. Surgeons, priests, herbalists, all tried to keep up with the constant stream of illness and deformity among the royal children. The court's medical records from this time read like a manual on genetic breakdown, scoliosis, seizures, malformed jaws, immune deficiencies, infertility, and mental illness. Still, the pressure to marry and bear children never eased. Maria Margherita was eventually married to her cousin, the Holy Roman Emperor Leopold I, the same man who had once married Margaret Theresa. This second union was equally tragic. Maria Margherita, cognitively delayed and physically fragile, didn't understand her marital obligations. Her body couldn't handle them even if she had. The psychological toll on these women was staggering. They lived in constant fear, not just of death, but of pregnancy. They knew what might happen. Another child with twisted limbs, another stillbirth, another infant who would never draw a full breath. Letters from the time reveal a haunting picture. Royal women writing to one another about lost babies, failing health, crushing guilt. Miscarriages were frequent. Infant deaths were expected. And worst of all, they blamed themselves, unaware that the real cause lived in their DNA. The science that could have explained their suffering wouldn't arrive for centuries. Instead, they were told they were cursed, or simply unlucky, or worse, unworthy. So how did it all happen? When close relatives have children, the odds of passing on harmful recessive genes rise sharply. In healthy, diverse populations, those genes are usually balanced out by stronger ones. But in a family where cousin marries cousin for centuries, bad genes begin to double down. Generation after generation, the genetic code deteriorates until it reaches a breaking point. This phenomenon is called inbreeding depression. It affects everything: physical strength, mental stability, immune function, fertility. And the Habsburgs were a masterclass in it. The most visible sign? The infamous Habsburg jaw, technically called mandibular prognathism. A condition so pronounced in some descendants that they couldn't close their mouths or chew solid food. But that was just the surface. Below it lay epilepsy, developmental delays, anxiety, infertility, depression, autoimmune disorders, all of it building across generations, each marriage tightening the noose. And yet, no one stopped it. Why? Because power came first. Royal marriages weren't about love. They were treaties, politics, strategy. The church, which could have forbidden close relative unions, did the opposite. It issued dispensations, special permissions, declaring these unions legal and holy. Purity, they said, was sacred, even when it destroyed the very bodies it flowed through. Even the women themselves, raised to see their blood as divine, sometimes continued the cycle, pushing for cousin matches to keep their family lines clean. They didn't understand they were participating in their own undoing, and each one hoped, desperately, that maybe her child would be the one to break the curse. It never happened. The Spanish Habsburg line ended with Charles II, who died childless in 1700. His death triggered the War of Spanish Succession and marked the moment when Europe began to realize the cost of keeping bloodlines pure. Royal inbreeding didn't stop overnight, but it slowed. Marriages between first cousins became less common. Awareness began to spread, and eventually, the truth could no longer be ignored. The women we've met, Maria Anna, Joanna of Castile, Margaret Teresa, Anna of Austria, Marie Antoinette, and the forgotten Infantas, were not just victims of genetics. They were victims of a system that saw them only as wombs, as carriers of dynasties, as assets. Their personal tragedies became scientific data. Their pain helped lay the foundation for what we now know about genetics, heredity, and the necessity of genetic diversity. That doesn't make their suffering justifiable, but it does mean it wasn't meaningless. They were real people, not footnotes, not cautionary tales. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, brilliant minds trapped in failing bodies, hearts broken by decisions they never made. Their legacy isn't their royal blood. It's the hard-earned lesson that human worth cannot be measured by family trees, that power without compassion leads to ruin, and that no lineage, no matter how noble, is worth the destruction of the very people who carry it. So return now to that first moment we imagined, waking up to find your body broken by choices you never made. That was their reality, every day, every breath. Yet in their quiet resistance, their dignity, their love, even when the world refused to love them back, they proved something powerful, that no amount of broken blood can crush the human spirit. Let their stories echo, not just as warnings, but as reminders of the courage it takes to survive what should have never been endured.